I originally was born and raised on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. And when I came to this area, I immediately was very comfortable because when I started teaching, I was working with kids that were growing up on ranches and farms, and I felt immediately accepted and taken in, almost family. And I realized that these were people that had the same values and the same outlook on life that I had. And I felt that there was something very special and unique about the character of the communities in this area. Work ethic was certainly one, honesty and integrity, kindness, a joy with life, an appreciation of the desert environment, not to mention all the working with cattle and horses and all the things that I loved as well.
I am from the McGee Ranch area, which is in the Sahuarita Mountains, which is west of Green Valley. My family's been here since 1898, homesteaded. So we've been here for a very long time. Generations, I'm third generation, my daughter's fourth, my grandsons are fifth. I was very fortunate to have my grandparents on my mother's side. Both of them were great storytellers of what was in the community. My grandfather was born in 1904, had lived in this area. They had lived down at Canoa Ranch for a while. So all the storytelling, it just formed me, and the old pictures they would drag out.
We lived on, my mom still lives there, 4789 Santa Maria Drive in Amado, Arizona.
It was a beautiful way of living, playing outside and with our Barbies. When it would rain, we would go out to the middle of the street where it would bank up a little bit of water. We would go and sit down and bring our Barbies out, and my brother did too. But he didn't have Barbies, of course. It was the G.I. Joes. But it was that kind of drink. Everybody would come out too, and just even the smell of the rain coming down and not being afraid to be out there, and just, I guess, the tranquility of the way of life.
I would say that the advantages would be, hey, you're not in a city, you're not around crime and drugs back in that day, those days, very tranquil living. Probably one of the cons in that would be that you were just out in the middle of nowhere. So if you wanted anything, to go to the movies, an ice cream, whatever it might be, you'd have to go to Tucson or Green Valley.
We lived a simple life, like they said, pretty much. It was just very simple, not too materialistic. It was because we didn't have a lot, to work with back then. We would roller skate. We would go to the park, to Soapbury Park, and play softball or kickball. With the whole neighborhood kids, we'd all meet up there and stuff. It was just very simple, and now, go to the store, we would walk or ride our bikes to the store. And like my sister said, we'd ride our bikes to school. And those are just simple things that you don't see a lot of the kids doing anymore. It's just for fun.
I grew up in Arivaca. At that time, the town was very, very small. There were no outlying homes other than ranches. There were some ranches out there. But when you go down now, there's all these homes out in the 40 acres. That was not there. That was ranch land, and it was the Arivaca Ranch. So growing up down there was very quiet. We could walk down the center of the street or sit in the center of the street, and we wouldn't see a car for hours and hours and hours. In fact, we did that a few times, just for fun. But, there were no phones when I was first growing up down there. We didn't have any phones in the area. Closest phone was at the Cow Palace. The closest place, right, 25 miles away. Closest shopping was either Nogales or Tucson, 63 miles away, 65 miles away, something like that.
I grew up at the village in Sahuarita. Now, the area, I understand there were like about 40 families at its peak, perhaps. It's Sahuarita. Because if you have ever heard A saguaro is not feminine. They're always masculine. My cousins lived right behind us. Those were the Rodriguez, Frank and Josephine. And it was in their yard that they had this big mesquite. And it had one particular arm that was very low, and it extended almost straight across. And we would play under that big mesquite with those kids after school always. We used to draw on the ground with sticks. You know, here's the kitchen, here's the living room. And then we'd go up the trunk of the tree, and then we'd walk over on that one branch. And I don't remember whether that was like, I don't know what part of the house it was. But that's what we'd go. We'd go and, or what we do, go after school or even before school.
I lived in north of Tubac on a ranch that my mom and dad purchased when he came back for World War II. We call it a ranch, a farm, because we had cattle, but my dad had the cattle in Arivaca on the Moises Ranch. We had the fields that we had corn, watermelon, cantaloupe, tomato, green chili. My dad taught us at an early age not to be afraid of work, and we were out there planting plants, transplanting the plants onto the field, spent my time on knees. I felt I never had to go back to church because I was always on my knees.
I know that Terry told me that some of your ancestors are from the Otero family.
Yeah.
What she didn't tell me was the significance of the Otero family and how he got that land from the King of Spain. This was before this was Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Even before, because it was Mexico before it was the United States, but even before Mexico.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that at all?
The way we understood it from my sister, because she did a history of the family, the Otero land grant was given the grant from the King of Spain. He came over and he settled what is now the Otero land grant. And it was a big old thing, okay? The way they gave it to as you retired from working for him, he would give you a different section of the ranch. And you, whatever you produce, you would have to give back to him. In other words, he got half and he got some. But he made the ranch bigger, and that way he could keep the ranch working that way.
I grew up in Continental, and on the farm there, we didn't have no amusement park or anything, so we would chase cattle and stuff like that, play baseball, and just a small community. So we would all get together and do a little sports, baseball, football, stuff like that.
I was a sophomore in high school when we moved into those homes. Before that, we lived in, we called it the camp, and there were houses right along the edge of the mountain. And up until that point, we lived there, and we had no idea. We didn't have a phone and cell phones. God knows it. We wouldn't have known if we'd gone somewhere. I don't even know how we did it. You go somewhere and if something went wrong, what did you do? But it was amazing, like Rudy was saying. But you learn to survive, and we didn't know the difference. We thought everything was good.
Yeah, because we were a close-knit community. Everyone knew everyone, and every parent watched out for other kids. So it wasn't just like, I'm taking care of my own kids and that's it. If they seen you doing something wrong, they would tell you, no, you shouldn't do this or that because of the trouble you can get in. Mm-hmm. So I will say everyone in Continental grew up to be pretty well respectable people.
So originally, my dad worked for the Canoa Ranch, but they had us families all the way out that we were right off the ranch we were on. It was between Arivaca Road and Sassabee. So we were in there somewhere in the mountains. And I was there like 5 years, and then I had to go to school. So there was no way for me to go to school, so they had to send me to Tucson for the school year to live with a distant aunt. Then the owners at the ranch decided that wasn't right, so they moved us into Canoa Ranch, down to the ranch, where I started going to school at Sopri School because they couldn't decide if we were in Sopri's district or Continental's district.
School was great. Our ride was a 13-mile bus ride to the original Sopri School, not where it's at today, but the original one down on the Arivaca Road. It was 2 rooms. When I started, it was 2 rooms. 1st through 3rd was in the 1 room. 4th through 8th was in the 2nd room. It was great. There was an apartment that they had built onto the school originally. I think it might have been a 2-bedroom. But the teachers they would always try to find a man and wife teaching team. And they would live at the school, and that was part of their salary, that they could live right there and then teach the kids. So we had, I think, some really great teachers. We had teachers who wanted to be out in the rural areas like that.
But it was the education we got because you were 3 classes in 1 room. So if you're in the 6th grade, you're catching everything from the 8th grade on. So I'm saying we had superior education to the kids in town.
School was everything to most of us because that's where you had all your friends, where you met new friends of families who would come and go in the area. Mostly generations of families that would come after one another.
I remember the teachers. Back in those days, they could hit you if they decided to. Or I remember one principal. Somebody overflowed a toilet, and one of the older kids. She walks in and says, "Who did that?" And they said, "He did." We're the only black students there. It was him. So she got me and she said, "I'll shake you till your teeth rattle." I'm like, oh, I don't know. My dad, if he would have known that, I didn't say anything, but yeah, my dad wouldn't have tolerated that.
And then there was a bus driver, Archie. I'm sure he didn't have all the routes, but at least I know he had ours. And one time we were doing a play. It was George Carver Washington play. And they needed a rocker. And I had a rocker. So he drove me home to pick up the rocker, the rocking chair, and bring it to school, and we used it. Can you imagine a bus driver taking a young student, home to their house and picking up a piece of furniture or anything else anymore? And that's what's gone. It's that comfort, that trust.
We actually moved out here into Elephant Head back in 1975, so I was just a 2-year-old. And we were one of the early families out in the neighborhood. At that time, there was not even phone lines to anyone's homes. And of course, that's a long time before cell phones came along. So we had a car and a truck. The car and the truck both had a CB radio, because sometimes the Santa Cruz River would not always agree with Dad's plans to come home after work. And so Mom and Dad had to have a way to communicate, and the CB radios worked. So
I grew up right up here in Elephant Head on Quail Way, it used to be called. Then they named it Foxwood. And we were one of the first families out here.
We moved to the Elephant Head area in around 1981. I was going into 6th grade and all the way through when I graduated high school. So it was kind of strange coming in new. I had never moved before, and we came in 6th grade. Everybody had already been familiar with each other and knew each other from elementary school, so I was kind of a new kid, but I had no problems making friends. Everybody was very friendly and accepted me in, and before I knew it, I was just one of the regulars there. So it was nice to grow up, actually. Once we got out there, we were able to have lots of animals. We raised pigs for 4-H, and I had rabbits. We had chickens, and it was like a regular farm. We had lots of horses and lots of work. So definitely learned a good work ethic.
most of my friends, like between 3rd grade and 5th grade, most of them were raising animals that they got to sell at the fair. I was a very emotional, attached little kid. And there was no way I could have raised up this beautiful pig and then let it go home to the meat market at the end of the fair. So one of my 3rd grade companions, her name's Joanne, her dad suggested to my parents, well, Joanne also raises a dairy goat, and that's a breeding project, so you get to keep your goat. Well, this was 1983, so I got my very first registered goat, a beautiful little Nubian doe. And goats took me across the country, basically. Through my 4-H experiences, we got to go compete in California, showing animals over there. I kept a record book in 4-H that document all the things we did, community service and leadership activities, and a lot of different things that we did. Environmental projects to help restore habitat for wildlife and things like that as well. And that record book earned me a trip to get to go to Chicago for a week.
Probably enjoying the wide, wild spaces. I mean, we could ride our horses all day long. We could go out on the state land and travel down the power line road and basically make it to Patagonia if we wanted to go that far. We rode from our house all the way to Elephant Head multiple times. And we just, it was simple, it was quiet, it was a nice place to grow up.
We were out in the desert. My best friend is about 4 houses down. He's almost a mile away. And I had to ride my bike or jog down to his house to play after chores were done. And usually had to help him finish his chores so that we could play. And it creates a lot of resourcefulness and imagination, because we didn't have a lot of stuff, we didn't have anything, so we have to make something up and go out in the desert and just figure out what to do and play. And we never seemed to have an end of ideas and fun to have.
Us kids got older and we would call Mr. Johnson, and he would allow us kids to come down here and fish, stay for the weekend, and we'd come down here and put our survival skills to work, not bring any food, try to live off the land, and end up, well, most of the time calling our moms, going up and telling Mr. Johnson we needed his phone. We were smart enough to bring a sack of potatoes, get dropped off with a sack of potatoes, and some cast iron and some cooking oil, and a sleeping bag and a fishing pole, and our blowguns. We were deadly with the blowguns. We weren't allowed to take our 22s out here. So we brought our blowguns, and we could shoot squirrels and rabbits and pull our little living off the land stuff. But a lot of times the potatoes were our diet because the fishing was unsuccessful. But my father taught me a way to catch a bullfrog on a rod and reel. Most people, they gig the frogs or they shoot them and they have to wait till after dark, but we could catch bullfrogs during broad daylight, big ones, and we found out how good their legs were, and we ate a lot of frog legs on this pond here.
The fields, the greenery, the cotton, and the coolness that you'd feel in the evening from all the irrigation. Yeah. It was special. We'd sit outside on the swing and tell stories and look at the stars,
My biggest memories are like when we used to go to Madera Canyon, and our family from Superior would come down, and the houses weren't very big and stuff, and then we would get just carloads of people and go up to Madera Canyon, and we'd play games, kickballs, and there was a little more room back then in Madera Canyon because there was a center spot that I remember that was very open before the little falls and stuff, and that was always really neat. We always had to be done by, like my brother was mentioning, by 5 o'clock, because at 5 o'clock was dinner, and then we ate dinner, and then we had to wash the dishes and whoever week it was, and do the chores that we had to do, and then get ready for bed the next day at school, and then start all over. It was a routine pretty much, but we always had to be done by a certain time because then that was dinner time.
The pecan trees, when they first started planting them, as a kid, I got a job during the summer, and we would wrap the trees to keep the frost from them. And we grew up, excuse me, and we grew up just learning different things on the farm and watching the trees. At one point, we were taller than the trees and didn't know,
And you're talking about the pecan orchards down there,
yeah,
around Green Valley and Sahuarita.
Well, going back to when we were growing up, everybody, like I said, a lot of people work for FICO, and it was kind of sad because I think the wages, at one point we made 60 cents an hour, I believe. And my dad didn't make a whole lot more, but the thing that kept us afloat was the camp that we grew up in. It was, we had, I think, the gas we paid for, but the electric, water, and everything else was, it was pretty much, given because, we were farm workers. And I always used to wonder, how in the world did they make it, My dad, I think by the time he retired, he had gotten all the way up to $1.10 an hour.
We didn't have a lot of traffic from over the border. The traffic we did have from over the border were very poor people, and they were just looking for work. And they would come up and knock on your door, and my grandmother and my mother both spoke Spanish fluently. So they were able to talk with them. And they would say they would like some food and can they work? And they wouldn't take the food unless my grandmother could give them something to do. So half the time it was just like, well, you could pull that patch of weeds for us and things like that. And then she'd go in and make their beans and food and everything and then have them eaten and they'd go on their way. It was not, it was not a big issue. And they weren't the type of people that were going to break into anyone's homes.
Faith in God, family is very important, and your friends. At the end of the day, what do you have?
For some reason, something always drew me back here. And people would say, why do you always come back? I said, because there's something special. I could never figure it out when I was a young man. I used to think, if I ever get out of this desert, I'll never come back. But one year in Michigan, I couldn't wait to get back.
I left for a year to Okinawa when I was in the Marines. Never been away, was really tough to leave. And I'll never forget, you're gone for a whole year and you just miss home terribly. And I just never forget flying into Tucson and, you look at the mountains, and I can still feel just like this excitement because you were home. You knew you were home just by looking at your hills, your surroundings, you knew that you were home.
For people who've never been here, there is so much history. It's not just the Indians, it's the cowboys, it's the cattle ranches, it's the old farmers that lived here. It's the people who were working in the cotton fields and bringing in the cotton gins, and then the trains, and then the mines. Just a lot of history is here.
Take in the beauty of the valley. Do not destroy. Have pride in what you have. Just take care of the land. It's beautiful if you just sit back and look. To this day, I can still go to my mom and dad's ranch here in Amado, and I can sit and watch the cardinals just come in and just sit on the mesquite tree and look at you like, hi, I'm here, and it's that beauty